Jake Morrison walked across the cold metal floor of the ship's observation deck. His boots made small sounds on the metal plates as he moved toward the huge window that showed the stars outside. The ship was so big that it took him 5 minutes to walk from one end of this room to the other. He had made this walk every day for the past 10 years, and he would keep making it until they reached their target. The stars looked the same as they always did. Small points of light scattered across the black space like tiny diamonds thrown on dark cloth. But Jake knew that somewhere out there, past all those stars, was the world they were looking for. The world where the creatures lived who had killed everyone he had ever known. 500,000 years ago, the Zephyrians had come to Earth. Jake's people had tried to talk to them, tried to make peace. They had offered trade, friendship, even gifts of human art and music. The Zephyrians had listened to all of this. Then they had turned their weapons on Earth and burned it until nothing was left but melted rock and ash. Most humans had died that day, but some had escaped in big ships like this one. They had taken everything they could carry, seeds from earth plants, pictures of their families, DNA samples from every animal they could save. Most important of all, they had taken their memories and their anger. Jake pressed his hand against the cold window and looked out at the stars. His great-grandmother had been one of the people who escaped from Earth. She had told stories to her children about blue skies and green grass and oceans full of fish. Those children had told the same stories to their children. Now Jake carried those stories in his mind. Even though he had never seen Earth with his own eyes, the door behind him opened with a soft sound. Jake turned to see Lisa Carter walking into the room. She was carrying a data pad in her hands and had the look on her face that meant she had found something important. The long-range sensors picked up something, Lisa said as she walked over to stand next to Jake. 3 star systems ahead of us. The energy readings match what we expected to find. Jake felt his heart beat faster. You mean them? Yes, the Zephyrians are still there. Their technology signatures are exactly the same as they were 500,000 years ago. They haven't changed at all. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Good, that means our plan will work. Lisa looked worried. Jake, are you sure about this? I mean, really sure? Once we do this, we can't take it back. We're talking about war against an entire species. Jake turned back to the window. Out there, in the darkness, the Zephyrian worlds were waiting. The creatures who lived on those worlds had never paid for what they did to Earth. They probably didn't even remember it. 500,000 years was a long time, and humans had seemed so weak and small back then, but humans were not weak anymore. While the Zephyrians had stayed the same, humans had grown stronger. They had learned new ways to build ships and weapons. They had changed their own bodies to make them faster and smarter. Most important of all, they had never forgotten what happened to Earth. Lisa, do you know what my great-great-grandmother's last words were? Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. She said, "Tell them we're coming." She was talking about the Zephyrians. She wanted them to know that someday humans would come back. Jake walked away from the window and headed toward the door. Send a message to all the other ships in our fleet. Tell them we found the enemy. Tell them it's time to wake up the others. Lisa followed him. The others meant the millions of humans who were sleeping in special chambers throughout the ship. They had been asleep for thousands of years, waiting for this moment. Soon they would all wake up and prepare for the war that had been planned for 5 centuries. The ship's computer system announced that Captain Nancy Brooks wanted to see Jake in the command center. Nancy was the leader of their entire fleet. She was smart and tough, and she had been planning this war longer than anyone else. Jake made his way through the ship's long corridors. The walls were covered with pictures and paintings that showed what Earth had looked like. Green forests and blue oceans and white clouds in a bright sky. Children playing in parks. Families eating meals together. All of it was gone now, but The pictures helped people remember why they were here. The command center was full of people working at computer stations. Big screens on the walls showed maps of the star systems ahead. Red dots marked where the Zephyrian ships were located. There were a lot of red dots. Nancy Brooks stood in the center of the room, looking at the displays. She was tall and had gray hair, and when she spoke, everyone listened. "Jake, look at this," she said, pointing to one of the screens. "Our scouts report that the Zephyrians have over 3,000 ships defending their home system. They have weapons platforms on 12 different moons. Their main fleet is bigger than anything they had when they attacked Earth." Jake studied the numbers. "But their technology is still the same, exactly the same. They've built more ships, but the ships aren't any better than they were 500,000 years ago." Jake felt that cold smile come back to his face. Then, "They're in for a surprise." Nancy nodded. "The wake-up process will begin in 6 hours. By tomorrow, every human in the fleet will be awake and ready to fight. Our children will finally see justice for what happened to Earth." Jake looked around the command center at all the people working to prepare for war. Each one of them carried the genetic memories of Earth in their minds. Each one of them had been born for this moment. "Send one message to the Zephyrians before we begin," Jake said. "Tell them that the children of Earth have come home. Tell them that we remember everything. The time for waiting was over. The time for revenge had finally come." The alarm sounds filled every corner of the Zephyrian Defense Council building. Fleet Admiral Zixithan ran through the long hallways, his 6 legs moving fast across the smooth floor. His crystal shell reflected the red warning lights that flashed on the walls. Behind him, other Zephyrian officers followed, their breathing heavy with fear. The main command room was full of panic when Zixithan arrived. Officers stood around computer screens, pointing at numbers and talking fast in worried voices. Science Overlord Velmer was standing in the center of the room, staring at the biggest screen with his 4 eyes wide open. "Report," Zixithan said. In a voice that made everyone stop talking, Velmer turned to face him. His normally blue skin had turned pale green, which happened to Zephyrians when they were scared. "Admiral, our long-range sensors have detected 37 large ships at the edge of our star system. They appeared out of nowhere using some kind of fold space technology." Zixithan looked at the screen. The ships were shown as white dots against the black background of space. They were big, much bigger than normal ships. But what worried him more was where they had come from. "Do we know who they belong to?" he asked. Velmer touched a control, and the screen changed to show energy readings. "The signatures are old, Admiral. Very old. They match records from our historical database, but that's impossible." "What do you mean impossible?" "The energy patterns match human technology. But we destroyed the humans 500,000 years ago. We watched their planet burn. There should be none of them left." The room became very quiet. Every Zephyrian in the command center knew the story of the human war. It had been taught in their schools for thousands of generations. The humans had been weak creatures who lived on a small blue world. When they refused to join the Zephyrian Empire, they had been destroyed as an example to other species. Zixithan studied the readings more carefully. The ships were not like the human vessels from the old records. These were sleek and dangerous looking, with designs that seemed to bend space around them. Whatever these creatures were, they had learned much in the time since the war. "Send a message to all defense fleets," he ordered. "Full battle alert. I want every ship we have ready to fight within the hour." On the human ship Nemesis, Captain Steve Parker sat in his command chair with his eyes closed. Thin cables ran from ports behind his ears directly into the ship's computer system. His consciousness was spread throughout the vessel, feeling every sensor reading and every weapon system like they were parts of his own body. The bridge around him was dark except for the glow from computer screens. His crew worked quietly at Their stations, their own neural implants connecting them to the ship's systems. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, and now it was finally here. "Captain," said Communications Officer Kelly Adams, "we're receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet." Steve opened his eyes and disconnected from the ship's computer. "Put it through." The main screen lit up with the image of a Zephyrian officer. The creature's crystal shell was decorated with symbols that showed his high rank. His 4 eyes stared out from the screen with a mixture of fear and anger. "Unknown vessels, you are entering Zephyrian space without permission. Identify yourselves immediately, or you will be fired upon." Steve smiled. After 500,000 years, the Zephyrians still sounded the same. Proud and demanding, even when they were clearly afraid. "Kelly, open a channel to all Zephyrian ships in the system." Kelly worked at her controls for a moment. "Channel open, Captain." Steve stood up from his chair and walked to face the screen. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "This is Captain Steve Parker of the Human Remnant Fleet. 500,000 years ago, your people came to our world. We offered you friendship. We offered you trade. We offered you peace. You responded by burning our planet and killing billions of our people." On the screen, the Zephyrian officer's eyes grew wider. His skin began to change from blue to the pale green color of fear. "That is impossible," the Zephyrian said. "The humans were all destroyed. We made sure of it. You made sure of nothing." Steve replied, "Some of us escaped. We have spent 500,000 years growing stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. We have come back to collect the debt you owe us." The transmission ended as the Zephyrian cut the connection. Steve turned to his crew, who were all watching him with eager expressions. "Tactical report," he said. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Webb, the ship's weapons officer, checked his displays. "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept us. I count 3,047 vessels of various sizes. They're using the same plasma, weapons and energy shields they had during the original war. And our fleet? 37 ships total, but each one of our vessels has the firepower of 50 of theirs. Our adaptive armor should make their weapons almost useless against us." Steve nodded. The humans had not spent 500,000 years just running away. They had used that time to become something new, something much more dangerous than their ancestors had ever been. Across the fleet, other human captains were receiving the same tactical information. Captain Amy Rodriguez prepared her fighter squadrons for launch. Captain Helen Torres armed her ship's planet-cracking weapons. Captain Tony Mitchell made ready his teams of enhanced soldiers for boarding actions. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Retribution as the Zephyrian fleet moved toward them. The enemy ships looked like insects swarming through space, their running lights making them glow against the darkness. "They outnumber us almost 100 to 1, said Captain Nancy Brooks, who was standing beside him. Jake watched the tactical display as the two fleets moved closer to each other. In a few minutes, the first battle would begin. The war that had been planned for 5 centuries was finally starting. "Nancy," he said, "do you know what the biggest mistake the Zephyrians made was?" She looked at him with a questioning expression. "They let some of us live," Jake said, "and humans never forget." The first battle lasted 17 minutes and 12 seconds. Captain Amy Rodriguez flew her fighter through the Zephyrian formation like a knife cutting through soft butter. Her mind was connected directly to her ship's computer, allowing her to think and react faster than any normal human could. The enemy plasma bolts moved through space in bright green streams, but they seemed slow to Amy's enhanced vision. She twisted her fighter around the incoming fire, her ship's hull shimmering, as the adaptive armor adjusted to deflect the energy weapons. Behind her, 20 other human fighters followed in perfect formation. "Their targeting computers can't keep up with our speed," reported squadron leader Chris Thompson over the communication channel. It's like fighting blind children, Amy watched her tactical display as the Zephyrian ships tried to surround the human fighters. There were hundreds of enemy vessels moving in complex patterns, but their movements were predictable. After 500,000 years, the Zephyrians still used the same battle tactics they had used against Earth. Break formation and engage individual targets, Amy ordered. Remember, we want to capture as many ships as possible for intelligence gathering. The human fighters scattered across the battlefield like deadly birds of prey. Each pilot was connected to an artificial intelligence that helped them calculate the best attack angles and weapon solutions. The Zephyrians had nothing like this technology. Their pilots still had to rely on their own reflexes and simple computer aids. Captain Steve Parker watched the battle from the bridge of the Nemesis. The main screen showed dozens of small explosions as Zephyrian ships were destroyed or disabled by the human fighters. His ship's weapons had not even been needed yet. Incoming transmission from the enemy flagship, announced Kelly Adams. The screen changed to show Fleet Admiral Zixithan. The Zephyrian's crystal shell was cracked in several places, and his pale green skin showed how frightened he was. Humans, please stop this attack. We can negotiate. We can find a peaceful solution to this conflict. Steve looked at the alien with cold eyes. Admiral, did you negotiate with the children of Earth when you burned their schools? Did you find a peaceful solution when you melted their hospitals? Zixithan's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. That was long ago. Those decisions were made by Zephyrians who are now dead. We are not responsible for the actions of our ancestors. But you benefited from those actions, Steve replied. Your empire grew larger because you destroyed our world. Your people lived better lives because you took what was ours. Now it is time to pay the price. Steve cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. Target their command ship's engines. Disable it, but don't destroy it. We need their leaders alive for questioning. The Nemesis fired a single beam of focused energy that sliced through the Zephyrian flagship's engine section like a hot knife through ice. The enemy ship went dark and began to tumble slowly through space. Across the solar system, other human ships were beginning their own attacks. Captain Helen Torres led her strike force against the military shipyards orbiting Vega Prime. Her ship, the Vengeance, carried weapons that could crack planets if needed. But today she only needed to destroy the enemy's ability to build new warships. Scanning the shipyards now, reported her science officer. I count 47 vessels under construction, including 12 heavy cruisers. Helen studied the tactical display. The shipyards were protected by energy shields and defense platforms, but the technology was old and weak compared to human weapons. Fire quantum torpedoes. Target the main construction facilities. The Vengeance launched 6 torpedoes that phase-shifted through the enemy shields as if they weren't there. The explosions that followed lit up the darkness of space as millions of tons of metal and equipment were turned into expanding clouds of debris. Meanwhile, Colonel Tony Mitchell was leading a very different kind of mission. His transport ship had landed on the surface of a Zephyrian military base, and his enhanced soldiers were now moving through the base's corridors like ghosts. Tony's body had been changed. Over many generations of genetic modification, he was faster, stronger, and smarter than any normal human. His bones were reinforced with metal alloys, and his muscles had been rebuilt with synthetic fibers. Most important of all, his brain had been enhanced with quantum processors that let him think at superhuman speeds. The Zephyrian guards never saw him coming. Tony moved through the shadows of the base, his adaptive camouflage making him nearly invisible. When he needed to disable a guard, he did it silently and quickly. His mission was to reach the base's central computer and download their military databases. "Colonel, I'm reading heavy security around the computer core," whispered Sergeant Lucy Phillips through the communication implant in Tony's ear. "How heavy?" Tony asked as he pressed himself against a wall to avoid a patrol. 20 guards, all armed with plasma rifles. Motion sensors in the hallways. Automated defense turrets at the main entrance. Tony smiled. The Zephyrians still fought. Like they had 500,000 years ago. They expected their enemies to fight like normal soldiers, using conventional tactics and weapons. Lucy, remember what we learned in training. The enemy expects us to act like our ancestors did. They don't know what we've become. Tony activated his cloaking system and moved toward the computer core. The motion sensors couldn't detect him because his body temperature was controlled by internal regulators. The guards couldn't see him because his camouflage bent light around. His body like water dot when he reached the computer terminal. Tony connected a data probe to the system. Information began flowing into his enhanced brain at incredible speeds. Battle plans, ship locations, troop movements, and most important of all, the locations of Zephyrian civilian populations. Back on the Retribution, Jake Morrison was reviewing the intelligence reports as they came in from all the human forces. The first day of the war had been a complete success. The human fleet had destroyed over 400 enemy ships while losing none of their own. More important, they had captured detailed information about Zephyrian military capabilities. Dr. Lisa Carter entered the command center carrying a data pad with a worried expression on her face. "Jake, I need to talk to you about Project Lazarus." Jake looked up from the tactical displays. Project Lazarus was the biological weapon that Lisa had been developing for decades. It was designed to target Zephyrian genetics specifically, leaving other species unharmed. "The weapon is ready," Lisa said quietly. "We could deploy it tomorrow, and the war would be over within a week. Every Zephyrian in the galaxy would be dead." Jake stared at the data pad in her hands. Inside that small device was the power to commit genocide on a scale that had never been seen before. With one command, he could eliminate an entire species from existence. "But," he asked, sensing that Lisa had more to say, "but if we use it, we become exactly what they were 500,000 years ago. We become the ones who destroy entire worlds." Jake walked to the large window that showed the stars outside. Somewhere out there, Zephyrian families were probably watching the news reports of the human attacks. Children were asking their parents why the strange aliens had come back to hurt them. "Keep the weapon ready, Lisa," he said finally. "But don't deploy it yet. Let's see if we can win this war without becoming monsters." Lisa nodded and left the command center. Jake continued to stare out at the stars, wondering if the ghosts of Earth would be satisfied with justice, or if they demanded complete revenge. 18 months had passed since the first battle, and the war was almost over. Admiral Ben Foster stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Retribution, watching as the last Zephyrian stronghold prepared for its final defense. The enemy homeworld hung in space before them like a blue and green jewel, beautiful and peaceful looking despite the massive fleet surrounding it. The Zephyrian Defense Force had fought bravely during the long war. Defense Commander Kolthak had proven to be a skilled leader, managing to win several small victories against human forces through clever tactics and desperate courage. But courage alone could not make up for the huge difference in technology between the two sides. "Status report," Ben said to his tactical officer. Lieutenant Gary Stone checked his displays. "The enemy has gathered their remaining ships around the homeworld. I count 800 vessels of various sizes. They've also activated planetary defense systems on the surface and positioned weapon platforms around all 3 moons." Ben nodded. It was exactly what he had expected. The Zephyrians were making their last stand at the most important world in their empire. They would fight with everything they had to protect their families and their government. "Any response to our surrender demands?" Ben asked. "No, sir. Commander Kolthak sent a message saying they would rather die fighting than surrender to us. Ben felt a mixture of respect and sadness. The Zephyrian commander was doing exactly what any good military leader would do in his situation. But it also meant that more people would die before this war was finished. On the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld, millions of civilians were being evacuated to underground shelters. The government had told them that the humans were coming to destroy their world, just as the Zephyrians had destroyed Earth long ago. Fear filled the streets as families gathered their belongings and tried to find safe places to hide. Commander Kolthak watched the evacuation from his command center deep beneath the capital city. His crystal shell was scarred from months of fighting, and his normally bright blue skin had faded to a dull gray color. He had lost 3 sons in battles against the human fleet, but he continued to fight because it was his duty to protect his people. "Sir, the human fleet is moving into attack position," reported his aide. Kolthak looked at the tactical display. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, like a school of deadly fish swimming through space. Each vessel was more powerful than anything in the Zephyrian fleet, and their weapons could destroy entire cities with single shots. "Send this message to all our ships," Kolthak said. "We fight not for victory, but for honor. We fight so that our children will remember that we did not surrender without trying to defend them." The final battle began at dawn, local time. Captain Lucy Phillips led the first wave of attack ships toward the Zephyrian defense line. Her vessel, the Vengeance, had been modified with new weapon systems that could punch through the strongest enemy shields. The Zephyrian ships opened fire first, filling space with streams of green plasma energy. But the human ships moved through the attack like dancers, their adaptive armor deflecting most of the enemy fire. When the humans fired back, their weapons cut through the Zephyrian vessels like hot knives through paper. "Enemy flagship is trying to ram us," reported Lucy's weapons officer. Lucy watched as a large Zephyrian cruiser turned toward her ship and accelerated at maximum speed. The enemy captain was trying to sacrifice his own vessel to damage the Vengeance. It was a brave move, but also a desperate one. "Port thrusters full power. Bring us around and target their engines." The Vengeance spun gracefully out of the way as the enemy ship passed by. A single beam of energy from the human ship's main gun disabled the Zephyrian cruiser's propulsion system, leaving it drifting helplessly through space. The battle continued for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Human ships destroyed or disabled enemy vessels with surgical precision, while taking almost no damage themselves. By midday, only a few dozen Zephyrian ships were still fighting. Jake Morrison watched the battle from the command center of the fleet flagship. Each destroyed enemy ship meant more Zephyrian families who would never see their loved ones come home. He felt no joy in the victory, only a cold satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Dr. Lisa Carter approached him carrying the same data pad she had shown him months earlier. "Jake, this is our chance. While their defenses are down, we could deploy Project Lazarus. We could end this war today and make sure the Zephyrians never threaten anyone again." Jake looked at the biological weapon specifications on the data pad. The virus would spread through the Zephyrian population within days, targeting their specific genetic structure. It would be quick and relatively painless, but it would also kill every member of their species in the galaxy. "How many civilians are still on the surface?" Jake asked. "Intelligence estimates about 2 billion. Mostly children, elderly, and non-military personnel." Jake thought about his great-great-grandmother's stories of Earth she had told him about. The children who had died when the Zephyrians burned the human world. Those children had never had a chance to grow up, to have families of their own, to see the stars that their parents had dreamed of reaching. But Jake also thought about the Zephyrian children hiding in shelters below him. They had not chosen to destroy Earth. They had been born long after that terrible decision was made. Did they deserve to die for the crimes of their ancestors? "No," Jake said finally, handing the datapad back to Lisa. "We won't use it." Lisa looked surprised. Jake, this is what we came here for. This is our revenge for Earth. Our revenge is victory, not genocide. Look around you, Lisa. We've defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy. We've proven that humans are stronger than those who tried to destroy us. That's enough. Jake opened a communication channel to the enemy command center. Commander Kolthak, this is Jake Morrison of the Human Fleet. Your military forces have been defeated. Your government can surrender now, or we can demonstrate our ability to crack your planet's surface. The choice is yours. The reply came quickly. We surrender, Human Morrison. We ask only that you show mercy to our civilians. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The war was over, and humanity had won without becoming the same kind of monsters that had destroyed Earth. All human ships, cease fire, he ordered. Begin rescue operations for survivors of the enemy fleet. Medical teams prepare to assist with civilian evacuation if needed. Captain Nancy Brooks, who had been quiet during the final battle, stepped up beside Jake. The galaxy is watching how we handle this victory, she said. What we do next will determine how other species see us, Jake nodded. Humanity had returned to the stars as conquerors, but now they had the chance to show that they could also be merciful. The children of Earth had proven their strength. Now they would prove their wisdom. The Zephyrian hegemony officially surrendered on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Jake Morrison stood in the ruins of the War Council chambers where the order to destroy Earth had been given 500,000 years ago. The room was exactly as the historical records had described it. High crystal walls that sparkled in the light, curved seats arranged in a circle, and in the center, the decision platform where the vote to commit genocide had taken place. Commander Kolthak knelt before Jake with his head bowed low. The Zephyrian leader's crystal shell was cracked and dull, showing his defeat and shame. Around the chamber, other high-ranking Zephyrians waited to learn their fate. Some of them were crying, which for their species meant their skin had turned a dark purple color. Commander Kolthak, Jake said in a voice that carried throughout the chamber, your government has been found guilty of genocide against the human species. Your military forces have been defeated. Your empire has fallen. Do you have anything to say before I pass judgment? Kolthak raised his head and looked at Jake with his 4 eyes. Human Morrison, I know that my people did terrible things to yours. I know that no words can bring back the billions who died when Earth burned. I ask only that you remember that most of my people alive today were not born when those crimes were committed. Jake felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Every human who had died on Earth, every refugee who had spent their life dreaming of home, every child born in exile who had never seen a blue sky or felt natural sunlight on their face. They all seemed to be watching this moment. Dr. Lisa Carter stood beside him, still holding the datapad that contained Project Lazarus. With one word from Jake, she could release the biological weapon and wipe out every Zephyrian in the galaxy within a month. It would be complete revenge, final justice for the destruction of Earth. But Jake thought about something his great-grandmother had told him in the stories passed down through his family. She had said that the best part of being human was the ability to choose kindness even when you had the power to choose cruelty. Commander Kolthak, the human government sentences your species to life, Jake said. You will be relocated to 12 agricultural worlds in the outer rim of this galaxy. Your technology will be limited to what you need for farming and basic survival. Your population will be monitored to ensure you never again develop the capability to threaten other species. The relief in the chamber was immediate. Several Zephyrians collapsed to the floor, their skin changing from purple to a bright yellow color that showed joy and gratitude. Kolthak himself began to tremble, his crystal shell making small ringing sounds. You are sparing us? Kolthak asked in disbelief. We are giving you what you never gave us, Jake replied. A chance to live. Jake turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the Zephyrians to process what had just happened. Outside, Captain Nancy Brooks was waiting for him with a smile on her face. "The galaxy is going to be very interested in this decision," she said. "Word is already spreading to other star systems about how humans chose mercy over revenge." Jake nodded. "Good. Let them know that humans remember their friends and never forget their enemies, but we also know the difference between justice and murder." Over the following months, the work of building a new galactic order began. Captain Amy Rodriguez was put in charge of the Zephyrian relocation program, ensuring that families were kept together and that the agricultural worlds had everything needed to support life. It was hard work, but Amy found it more satisfying than the battles she had fought. Colonel Tony Mitchell established monitoring stations throughout former Zephyrian space, watching for any signs that the defeated species might try to rebuild their military power. His enhanced soldiers became peacekeepers rather than warriors, helping to maintain order during the transition period. Dr. Lisa Carter sealed Project Lazarus in a secure vault deep beneath the surface of a remote moon. The biological weapon would remain there as a reminder of the terrible power that humans possessed, and the wisdom they had shown in choosing not to use it. Captain Helen Torres took command of the diplomatic mission to contact other species throughout the galaxy. Many civilizations had suffered under Zephyrian rule, and they were eager to learn about the humans who had defeated their former oppressors. "The Altarians want to establish trade relations," Helen reported to Jake during one of their regular meetings. "They're offering to share their medical technology in exchange for our defensive systems. The Centaurans are asking if we need any help with the Zephyrian relocations." Jake was pleased but not surprised. Humans had always been good at making friends when they were given the chance. Now that they were the dominant military power in this part of the galaxy, other species wanted to be their allies rather than their enemies, but not everyone was happy with the human victory. Intelligence reports indicated that some Zephyrian military officers who had escaped the final battle were trying to organize resistance movements. Small groups of enemy ships had been spotted in distant star systems, and there were rumors of weapons caches hidden on remote planets. "Let them try," Jake said when he heard these reports. "We defeated their entire empire when they were at full strength. A few scattered rebels won't be able to do much damage." The real challenge was deciding what kind of galactic power humanity wanted to become. They could rule through fear like the Zephyrians had, forcing other species to obey through threats of destruction. Or they could lead by example, showing that strength and mercy could exist together. Jake made his choice during a meeting with representatives from 20 different alien species. The gathering took place on a neutral space station, and the representatives had come to learn about human intentions for the future. "We did not fight this war to become conquerors," Jake told the assembled aliens. "We fought it to ensure that no species would ever again suffer what happened to Earth. Humanity offers friendship and protection to all peaceful civilizations. We ask only that you treat your neighbors with the same respect that you would want for yourselves." The response was immediate and positive. Species after species pledged to work with humanity in building a new galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination. Captain Nancy Brooks assumed command of the first human embassy ship, tasked with traveling throughout the galaxy to establish diplomatic relations. Her crew included representatives from many different species, showing that humans were serious about working together rather than ruling alone. As Jake watched the embassy ship depart for its first mission, he felt a sense of completion that he had never experienced before. Earth was gone and could never be brought back, but humanity had survived and grown stronger. They had faced their greatest enemy and won without losing their souls in the process. The ghosts of Earth could finally rest in peace. Their children had returned to the stars, and the galaxy was a better place because of it.